There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes that the little girl he raised is gone, not because she grew up, not because she moved away, but because something inside her changed and she chose to leave him behind. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday afternoon when my daughter slid a white envelope across a coffee shop table and asked me not to come to her wedding. My name is David Callahan. I'm 52 years old, and before you judge my daughter too quickly, you need to understand where we started. When Emily was 2 years old, her mother disappeared. No warning, no goodbye. One day we were a family. The next day there was an empty closet and a wedding ring sitting on the kitchen counter. That was it. I was 24 years old with a little girl who still needed help tying her shoes and a job at an auto body shop that barely covered rent. I didn't know what I was doing. Most days I was terrified, but every morning I got up and did it anyway, because Emily needed me. I learned how to braid hair by watching videos late at night. I packed school lunches. I attended every parent-teacher conference. I worked double shifts and overtime whenever it was available. When Emily got sick, I sat beside her bed. When she had nightmares, I stayed awake until she fell asleep again. I wasn't rich. I wasn't educated. I wasn't impressive, but I was there. Every single day, and for a long time that was enough. When Emily earned a scholarship to college, I thought all those sacrifices had finally paid off. I remember sitting in my truck after she opened the acceptance letter. I cried so hard I couldn't start the engine. What she never knew was that the scholarship didn't cover everything. I quietly borrowed against my retirement account to make up the difference. I never told her. I didn't want gratitude. I just wanted her future to be bigger than mine. College changed her. At first it was small things. Different clothes, different friends, different ways of speaking. Then she met Jeremy. He came from a world neither of us understood. His father was a retired surgeon. His mother sat on non-profit boards. Their family vacations looked like magazine advertisements. The first time I met them, I felt like I'd accidentally wandered into somebody else's life. Still, I tried, because Emily seemed happy. And happy was all I'd ever wanted for her. But over time, something started changing. Whenever I talked about the neighborhood where she grew up, she'd change the subject. Whenever I mentioned the auto shop, she'd become uncomfortable. It was subtle, small enough to ignore, at least at first. Then came the engagement. 14 months before the wedding, I expected excitement. Phone calls, planning, questions. Instead, I felt myself drifting further and further from her life. Months passed. Then one afternoon, a text appeared. "Dad, can we meet for coffee Tuesday? There's something I need to discuss with you." The word discuss bothered me. Not talk, not catch up. Discuss, like I was a client or a problem. Still, I showed up 15 minutes early. I ordered a black coffee and waited. At exactly 2 o'clock, Emily walked through the door. She looked beautiful, successful, confident, and strangely distant. She sat down without hugging me, without even asking how I'd been. In her hand was a white envelope. She placed it carefully on the table between us. Then she took a deep breath. "Dad," she said quietly, "I need you to listen before you react." Something inside me sank, because suddenly I knew. I didn't know exactly what she was about to say, but I knew it wasn't going to leave me the same man who had walked into that coffee shop. And a few seconds later, my daughter proved me right. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Emily kept her eyes on the envelope. I kept mine on her. Then she finally said it. "Jeremy's family is very traditional." I nodded slowly. "Okay, there are going to be important people at the wedding." Something about the way she said important made my stomach tighten. Not guests, not family friends. Important people. The kind of people who apparently existed in a different category than the rest of us. She took another breath. Then the words came out. "Dad, you don't really fit in with that crowd." I wish I could tell you I was shocked. The truth is, part of me had been expecting it. Not those exact words, but something like them. The distance between us hadn't appeared overnight. It had been growing for years. Slowly, quietly, like a crack spreading through glass. She kept talking about appearances, about expectations, about the future she and Jeremy were building. Then she pushed the envelope toward me. Inside was $10,000. $10,000 to disappear. $10,000 to miss the day I dreamed about since the moment I first held her in my arms. I listened without interrupting, maybe because I was too hurt to argue. Maybe because I wanted to hear how far she was willing to go. When she finally stopped talking, I picked up the envelope, placed it inside my jacket, and said one word. "Okay." The relief on her face hurt more than everything else combined. She smiled. Actually smiled. Then she kissed my cheek and walked away. Just like that. 30 years of fatherhood reduced to a transaction. I sat there for nearly an hour after she left. The coffee turned cold. The waitress asked if I wanted a refill. I barely heard her. All I could hear were Emily's words repeating in my head. "You don't fit." That night I drove home in complete silence. No music. No radio. Nothing. Just me and the road. The envelope sat on the passenger seat the entire drive. Every time I glanced at it, it felt heavier. As if it weighed far more than $10,000. As if it contained every sacrifice I'd ever made. The next 6 days passed in a blur. I went to work. Fixed engines. Changed transmissions. Came home. Ate whatever was easiest. Then sat alone in my apartment staring at walls. Sleep became almost impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily sliding that envelope across the table. Every time. Then 6 days before the wedding, my phone rang. The number wasn't familiar. Normally, I would have ignored it. Something made me answer. "Hello?" A nervous male voice responded. "Mr. Callahan?" "Yes." There was a pause. Then, "This is Jeremy." I sat upright immediately. Jeremy had never called me. Not once. In all the time he'd been dating my daughter. Not once. My heart started pounding. "Is Emily okay?" Another silence. Longer this time. Finally he spoke. "Can I come see you?" 20 minutes later, I watched his BMW pull up outside my apartment. He sat in the driver's seat for almost a minute, just sitting there, motionless. Then he stepped out, and before he even reached my front door, he started crying. Not quietly, not politely. The kind of crying that comes from genuine heartbreak. The kind people can't fake. I opened the door before he knocked. The moment he stepped inside, he looked at me and said something I never expected. "I'm sorry." Over and over. "I'm so sorry." I sat him on the couch and handed him a glass of water. For nearly 10 minutes, he couldn't stop apologizing. Finally, he managed to calm down. Then he pulled a folded document from his jacket. His hands were shaking. "I found this." I unfolded the paper and immediately recognized it. A copy of the cashier's check. $10,000. Attached was a note. "Payment for non-attendance." The words looked even worse written down. Jeremy stared at the floor. "Emily told me you didn't want to come." I said nothing. "She told me you felt uncomfortable around our friends." Still nothing. "She told me you preferred taking a vacation." He swallowed hard. I believed her. Then he looked up. His eyes were red, filled with disappointment. Not in me, in her. When I found this check, I confronted her. My chest tightened. "And?" Jeremy closed his eyes. Eventually, she admitted everything. The room went silent. For a moment, all I could hear was the ticking clock on the wall. Then Jeremy said something that changed everything. I called off the wedding. I stared at him, certain I'd heard wrong. "What?" I called it off. His voice cracked. I couldn't marry someone who treated her own father like that. If you've ever been judged by people who only measure success with money, subscribe. Because character always reveals itself eventually. Jeremy shook his head slowly. "My father is wealthy." His eyes met mine, but he missed most of my childhood. Then he pointed toward me. "You showed up." The room became very quiet, because for the first time in weeks, someone finally saw what my daughter had forgotten. For the first time in over a week, I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel unwanted. I didn't feel like a father who had failed. I felt seen. Jeremy stayed for hours that night. We talked about everything. His childhood. My struggles raising Emily. The difference between having money and having someone who actually shows up for you. And somewhere during those conversations, I realized something. Jeremy wasn't the problem. Never had been. The problem was the version of success Emily had been chasing. A version built on appearances instead of people. Over the next few days, Emily called constantly. Voicemail after voicemail. At first she was angry, then emotional, then desperate, but I couldn't answer. Not because I hated her, because I was still trying to understand how the little girl I'd raised had become the woman who handed me an envelope. 3 weeks later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, no carefully crafted image. Just my daughter, tired, broken, ashamed. The moment she stepped inside, she started crying. Real crying. The kind that comes from regret. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm sorry." For the next hour she talked. About the pressure, to the people she'd surrounded herself with, the way she'd become obsessed with status and appearances, the way she'd convinced herself that success meant leaving parts of her old life behind, including me. "I don't know how I became that person," she said through tears. Then she knelt beside my chair and took my hands. "I'm not asking you to forgive me today." Her voice shook. "I'm asking you to let me earn it. If you've ever had someone break your heart and still found a way to love them, subscribe. Because forgiveness is one of the hardest things a person can choose." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I saw it. Not the woman from the coffee shop. The little girl who used to wait by the front door for me to come home from work. And for the first time I believed she saw me too. Months later, Emily and Jeremy held a small wedding. No country club, no guest list designed to impress strangers. Just family, just people who cared. When I walked her down the aisle, she squeezed my arm and smiled through tears. "Thank you for not giving up on me, Dad." I smiled back. There was never a chance I would. And as I watched her begin a new chapter, I realized something. The $10,000 had never been the real loss. Almost losing my daughter was. And getting her back was worth more than any amount of money ever could be.